So I'm here today to talk to you about how to leverage your internal community. Now, I think we've probably all seen this quote a lot in the last few years, right? Last decade. Software is eating the world. This comes from Mark Andreessen, the creator of the Netscape browser, now a major investor in Silicon Valley. He's an investor in Stack Overflow, actually. And just to, I think, understand how true this is, think about everything you've done today, right? Everything that you've done today, you probably did by interacting with software, right? I mean, I got up, I went and talked to some friends. I had to take a car to get over here. On those days where I really didn't want to have to get out of bed to turn off my lights, just press a button on my phone and my lights all turn off. All because everything that we do every day is now intermediated by software, which is of course why developers have become so important in all of business. And just to see that, every bank I've talked to in the last 5 years has said the same line to me, right? We're not a bank, we're a technology company that deals with money, right? And they've really internalized it. If you look at the setups, right, whether you are trying to trade on the markets, that's driven by computers. If you're looking to pick a new bank that you're going to be going to, you're probably looking at what the mobile and online banking experience is like. And that infusion of technology and business has also driven a huge change in what all of our everyday jobs are like. So this is data from the Federal Reserve Bank in the US. And you'll notice that there's one line on that chart, that orange line, that's going way up and to the right, much more than everything else. And that's showing the growth of what are called cognitive, non-routine jobs. Jobs that are all about using your brain to figure out and solve problems, what we might also call knowledge workers. And whether you are working in manufacturing, where you're now maintaining systems and figuring out how these complex systems work together to build things, or you're a software developer who instead of just writing code is figuring out how to architect solutions by gluing together 14 different APIs and SDKs, all of our jobs today are so much more about judgment and communication and problem solving. My favorite example here is actually in the audio industry. So 20 years ago, I got my first car. It was a really nice Toyota Corolla. I liked it a lot. But I really wanted to be able to listen to music and get GPS directions, and that was not available in cars. And so I rigged up an old laptop with an inverter under the passenger seat, a nice little control keypad, an old GPS hiking unit. I mean, these are real pictures from it, and some really jerry-rigged software, all hooked up to a cassette adapter so that the sound would actually come out through my speakers in the car. And you know what? I was able to play MP3s and get directions from my car while driving. Advanced technology at the time. Now today, the average car has 100 million lines of code in it. And I know we're not supposed to measure productivity by lines of code, but that's a lot of technology, right? Every single subsystem, every single function of that car is driven by software. And the amount of code in every car is doubling every 5 years. But on top of that, our entire experience with the car is technology, right? Go and look at ad campaigns for cars these days. It's all about the software, the technology, the cool things it can do for you, not just about how big the engine is anymore. So whether you're a bank, whether you're a car company, whatever you do, we're all technology companies now. So why am I going on and on about this when I told you I was going to talk about communities? Well, the reason is that we've made all these advances in what technology is doing for business, but we're still working in the same ways, right? We interact with our coworkers in so many of the same ways. We have so many of the same work processes. If you go back 200 years, piecework was the advanced work technology of the time. Right? Everyone was doing that. You could take it. It's super isolating. You could just take it, go home, make whatever you needed to do, right? 100 years ago, though, they realized, hey, if we're going to make bigger and more complex things like cars, we need people together in one place more, interacting with each other, and the assembly line is born as kind of the most advanced work technology of the time. You move forward to today, and what do we really have, right? We have this different job, right? Everyone is more knowledge workers, and short of putting us all in an open office space together, what have we done to advance technology of working? And the real answer of how we collaborate better, how we actually work together to get our brains working and creating this new technology, is communities. This is what is the underlying fabric that allows us to produce more together. So we're all part of communities every day, right? Whether it's who you live with, who you work with, your family, the people you're all here with at this conference right now. But how many companies have thought about how they use this internally, right? How many of you have thought about how you leverage your community at work to do more? Now, we've seen a lot of companies who have figured out how to do this externally. So my favorite example of this actually right now is Apple, right? 30 years ago, they roll out Mac OS, and there's the ability to build applications and things for it, but they kept a very closed ecosystem overall, and they end up losing the desktop wars to Microsoft. It was a very open ecosystem. So fast forward 20 years to 2008, launch of the iPhone. There's actually a huge internal battle over whether there should be an app store for the iPhone. If you don't remember this, the original iPhone actually did not have apps. You could build web apps for it, but there was no store for it because Steve Jobs didn't want it. A year later, when they roll out the second one, they're like, all right, we're going to actually do an app store now. And iOS, the rest is history. iOS is now the most valuable mobile ecosystem that's out there, because Apple went out and embraced this larger community of developers. Now, why'd they do it? It's not just so they could get more people making more things. It was to outsource their innovation. So if you take out your phone right now and you look at it, look at even just the smallest features on this phone, right? The flashlight, do not disturb mode, night shift. All of those features were originally written by third-party developers in Apple's community, not by Apple themselves. They outsourced the innovation, they let people figure out what was the best things, what needed to be done, how to solve more problems, and then pulled all those innovations into the core of their product. We've done the same thing at Stack Overflow, right? So Stack Overflow, I'm guessing a few of you here have used it before, hopefully. 60 million people a month come to Stack Overflow. And together they've built this massive knowledge base of 17 million questions and 26 million answers. So why'd we use a community to build this knowledge base? Well, we were going out to document all the world's programming knowledge. We couldn't go out just to every single company that builds every platform and say, hey, can you tell us everything there possibly is to know about every problem that could ever arise with your product? And then we're going to put that on a website. Right? They don't actually know all those things. How to do everything with all of the technology is in the minds of each of the 25 million plus developers that are all scattered all over the world here. And so we went out and we got them and we said, hey, come here, help each other, collaborate, and we're going to build all of this knowledge together. And that's the reason that Microsoft and Google and Apple now all pay people to just sit on sites like Stack Overflow and GitHub, looking at what they're doing, what they're talking about, to outsource their innovation and pull it back in. But the best part is, you can do the same thing internally, right? Instead of having just 5 or 10 product people out of your 200-person team, or whatever your ratio is, do all of the innovation, all of the sourcing of knowledge for your internal products and your internal efficiency and building, you can get everyone in your company sourcing that knowledge and innovation by using your community. So just take a second and think about something that you're building today, right, inside your companies. What was the last problem that you really focused on and saw that you weren't responsible for, but you really wished you could have changed? How did you communicate that back to people, right? Do you already have a way that you could easily funnel that feedback, short of like just walking over and bugging your friend who you know happens to work on that product internally? Now, part of the reason a lot of companies don't have good internal communities built around this is they sort of have the accidentally built ones, or they have focused ones around a certain topic, like the group of people who all bike together. But the reason for this is that healthy communities don't exist by accident, right? They exist because somebody really wanted them to. And what I'm going to walk you through now is how you actually do that process. And I'm going to draw on a lot of experiences that we have at Stack Overflow, both from building kind of stackoverflow.com and that big public site, as well as building all of the internal communities that we help companies build using our products like Stack Overflow for Teams. So the first thing you need to do is answer 3 key fundamental questions that will kind of set your vision for what you're doing. The first one, what's your objective? What are you trying to even do? What's the end state you want to get to? So in the case of Stack Overflow, our goal is to connect everyone who codes to everything that they need to know. So to do that, we've got to get everyone, and we've got to get all of their knowledge out into this nice, highly discoverable knowledge base, right? Something that people can actually find things over and over again instead of just asking each other the same question over and over again. So the question of your objective is inherently tied then to your second question. Who's your audience for this? Because it can't be everybody, right? You can never be everything to everyone. It just doesn't work. So whether we're building a site publicly on stackoverflow.com or we're building it internally with a company, we're focused on the people who are actually connected to building technology and product. Now, that can be a little bit broader than you might initially think, right? That's not just developers. That's developers. It's also obviously product managers, sysadmins, designers, but it's also the people who really consume it, especially if you go back to what I was talking about earlier with how our jobs have changed. I'm not a developer. I never have been, but I've still written so many lines of code, whether it's like SQL or Python, just trying to automate and make my job a little bit easier, right? More and more people every day have to interact at a much deeper level with technology and with code. And so pulling in all of those people who are directly affected lets us get a wider range of knowledge coming in. The final question to ask yourself is, what's your common link between all these people, right? And again, this ties in very closely to what's your objective, who's your audience, what's your common link. These all kind of, you almost have to go around in a little bit of a circle doing a little iteration to figure it out. Because you need to create an emotional attachment. And there's some more that comes to that down the line, but fundamentally, you have to figure out something that's both a wide enough set that it encompasses everyone you want to include, but a narrow enough focus that it creates that attachment for them. Because if you don't do that, they come and they take a look and they're like, okay, why is this special? Why is this different for me, right? Stackoverflow.com, when it launched, was focused on, this is a site for developers by developers, right? We will solve your problems. We're not going to have extraneous conversation, right? You're not going to find weird Yahoo answer style questions that just have nothing to do with achieving our end goal of creating this corpus of all the world's software development knowledge. So once you've set your objective, you need to figure out how you're going to do this, right? Where are you going to go build your community? That means picking the right tool for the job. So as another slight segue, because I like segues, I used to be an event producer. I told you, not a developer originally. First thing that we would do whenever we were putting on an event was think about the venue, right? Because we wanted, from the moment that someone walked in the door, I mean, not only did you obviously have to have enough space to like do everything you wanted to do, enough space to hang the screens, we wanted the right feel from the moment that people walked in the door. And picking the right tool for the job is the exact same thing. Does it actually have the attributes that you need based on what you're trying to do? So there were a few things that we thought about with Stack Overflow. Now, these are not like the canonical, the 3 things you should think about. They're just a couple examples of things we were thinking about. The first one was, we wanted something that was going to support asynchronous communication. This is really important to us because Stack Overflow is a massive global community. We have visitors from more than 200 countries around the world every month, right? In fact, 80% of questions on Stack Overflow are answered by someone in a different country than the asker. Now, if our setup was optimized, like, say, real-time chat software is, just for optimizing interaction between two people when they're both online, you'd lose that global nature in the same way unless people happen to be online at the same time. Related to that, because we wanted information to be found again and again, we built our Q&A to optimize for what we call archival quality content. So going back to the cell phone example, if you think about a message that you send to a friend as a text message versus an email, right? Same device, same keyboard, same person you're talking to, but you probably write completely differently because the software and the social context around them are completely different. Same's true for any piece of software that you use, and this is why the design of software is so important. In our case, the average Stack Overflow question is viewed 1,000 times after it's answered. So we don't want people to have to go re-answer the same thing again. We're optimizing for really finding that information again and again. Third thing, ease of adoption. This was really important for us. We wanted people to just come in and have it feel natural. Now, it gets a little easier for us now when we're like deploying private communities because, of course, it's the same software, so people are used to it. But this is actually something we've seen spread throughout a lot of software in the world, and I think it's driven by a shift in what people expect when they're at work. So going back to the iPhone, 10 years ago, people had very low expectations of what their software at work was going to be like. And then the iPhone comes out, and the consumerization of the enterprise, and bring your own device. And now just look at the software that we have available to us in the enterprise and what people's expectations is, right? They want to be using the same things that they get to use at home, whether that's Google Apps, whether that's Slack, whether that's GitHub, whether that's Stack Overflow, whether that's their iPhone. And so they want things that are easy to adopt, that they don't have to spend a bunch of their time and energy learning how to use just because like they have to use it in this one place. So those are the three things we were really thinking about. But again, there's a lot of different factors. You've just got to connect it back to that question of what your objective is and what you're trying to do. So let's talk about motivations and incentives next. Because once you've picked your tool and you know where you're going to do this thing, you've got to actually get people to do stuff, right? You've got to make them want to participate. In our case, when we think about motivation and incentives, it's about doing two things. It's about driving more of the right actions. Because more activity is generally a good thing, but if they're doing the wrong things, that's not very good. And there's a lot of very subtle things we need people to do that they may not realize instinctually. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with what's called the 90-10-1 rule of social media. But basically, it's this general rule that applies to big social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. And what it says is that 90% of people are only ever going to consume information on your site. 10% of those people will then interact with the information, so voting, liking, that kind of thing. And only 1% are actually going to do the major content creation. Now on sites like Stack Overflow and Wikipedia, what I call big knowledge sites, that's actually an even more extreme disparity. 99% of people will only consume on Stack Overflow and Wikipedia and that kind of thing. And only 0.1% of people are going to do all of that really heavy curation and content generation. But internally, where you've got existing bonds between people and where you set up your incentive structures right, it's like 2 orders of magnitude higher than that, right? So when we set up an internal Stack Overflow community, we actually see 30% of people participating and about 4 to 5% doing the really heavy content creation. And the way you do that is by leveraging the existing social bonds that people have and setting up the right incentive structures. So there's 3 things that we use. First up is voting. So people are probably familiar with Stack Overflow's voting system. You click things up and down. Now, voting serves two really important things for us. Number one, it of course orders all the information, right? It captures the wisdom of the crowd to put everything in the right order for you to find the best content. But the other thing it does is it says thank you, right? If you're going to take the time out of your day to answer a question, you want to know when that question has impacted someone else. And every time someone clicks an upvote button, the person who contributed that content gets a little ping and says, hey, this helped someone, right? You just earned 10 reputation points because this helped someone. And that's really important. That leads into the second thing, which is reputation. So if a single vote is about saying thank you, the collection of votes and the reputation that you've earned from it is about letting you show the magnitude of your contribution, right? This is something that you can wear. I mean, you could literally make a little like sign that you put on your chest if you wanted to, and on your profile you do. This shows you how much you've given back to that community that you're a part of. And again, if you're going to take the time, if you're going to regularly contribute, you want to be able to see that. You want to be able to see what you're doing. But I also mentioned that there's a lot of really subtle things we need you to do, right? Reputation's great for saying, hey, you've contributed all of this content that's really helped people, but have you done everything else, right? Or how do you even know what the right things to do are? So one question I like to ask people, if they haven't studied all the deep mechanics of Stack Overflow before, is who thinks it's okay to ask and answer your own question on Stack Overflow instead of letting someone else answer it? Okay, most people. Well, that's good, because it is. Trust me, you should totally do it. The way we tell you it's good, though, is by giving you a badge if you do that, right? We'll also give you a badge if you go and edit someone else's question. Or if you go and answer a question that's been unanswered for a really long time, we'll give you a badge for that. If you ask a question that gets a certain number of upvotes, we'll give you a badge for that. All of these things that we want you to do and we want you to know that you should do, we give you badges for. And so the voting, the reputation, the badges, they all play together to incentivize and shape your behavior in different ways to get the right things happening. So, 3 kind of really important things of what you should do with your motivation and incentives. 1, leverage, especially internally, leverage your existing bonds, right? Number 2, encourage the participation, obviously. And number 3 is recognize online contributions in the offline world. So with Stackoverflow.com, we have to pretty much do all of our recognition online. But if you're building a community internally with real people, there's no reason you need to leave it there. So a good example of this when we're working with companies is we tell them, hey, if you've already gotten a newsletter that goes out to your engineering team, go ahead and every time you send that out, include like a best question of the week, right? Or a best contributor of the week, whoever earns the most new reputation. If someone on your team gets a problem answered for them by someone on a completely different team, email their manager and say, hey, your person really solved a problem for me here. Like, thank you for that. That was awesome. People want to know when they've made an impact. Now, I'm also going to give you a couple warnings. The recognition don'ts. Number 1, never offer direct payment for participation in a community. This is really important because our participation in communities, our helping of other people, is driven by what's called intrinsic motivation in humans, right? Our innate desire to help those that we have a bond with. Now, if I start introducing what are called extrinsic or external motivators, a fascinating thing happens. Not only do I start optimizing for only doing those activities that I am going to get those extrinsic motivations for, it actually destroys the intrinsic motivation that I previously had. So this is why we will never let you pay to get an answer to your question on Stack Overflow, right? People ask us this all the time because they're like, man, I have this hard question. Wouldn't I get it answered faster? And the answer is no. And in the process, you'd actually wipe out all of the free answering that people are doing. Now, that's not to say that you can't ever give someone anything for participating, but they do have different incentives. And so you just need to be really careful about how you structure it. In particular, disconnect things. So in our case, we have Stack Overflow jobs. This is where you can go on Stack Overflow and find your next job. One of the things you can do there is you can actually show the answers that you've written or your reputation that you've earned to potential employers, right? We're not saying, hey, answer a question and we'll pay you for it. What we are saying is, if you take more and more of the right actions and build up examples of how you've helped the community, you can use that to potentially get something you want. We'll run contests sometimes where we send people who've created a lot of things, right? Or we'll have companies internally, we'll say, hey, for every upvote you get on a question, we're going to enter you in a raffle to win one of like 20 t-shirts, right? People, by the way, people love t-shirts. I don't know why it is. They were giving them out here, so I'm guessing everyone here took them seriously. T-shirts and stickers will motivate people to the ends of the earth. It's incredible. So you can disconnect it, right? It's not something too valuable. It's not saying take this one action and you're guaranteed a thing. It's do these things that are good, and maybe you'll get something cool in the end. So once you've figured out how you're going to do your motivations and what software you're going to be using and what your objective is, it's time to actually get started building all this up, right? So the first thing you need to do is get buy-in. Now, sort of counterintuitively, the first thing you need to do before you go and build a giant online community that involves everyone around the whole world is start by talking like one-on-one with just a few people. Because you need support to actually build that community. So when we're talking internally, one of the big advantages you have is you probably already know what the big pain points are, right? And most importantly, you probably know who the people in your organization that are really suffering from the pain points are. So what we say is go and talk one-on-one with them. You know, with Stack Overflow, one of the things we do is when we're going into a company to help them build a community, we say, who are the people that answer the same question every day in chat software, right? Who's building your new internal cloud architecture and has to train 100 developers on how to build using best practices here and source all that knowledge from the organization? Because those are the people that are really going to have an incentive to help shift work practices. So once you've gone out and you've figured out who those people are and you've talked to them, hopefully they're really enthusiastic about working with you on this, it's time to actually build up your base of content and be ready to launch. And again, this applies whether you're doing something like Stack Overflow, if you're doing a forum, any kind of community, you need to build your base of content. And the reason for that is nobody ever wants to be the first person to a party, right? You've got to make it seem like this is a good and valuable and exciting place to be. So invite those early supporters before everyone else and have them seed in that good content, whatever it happens to look like based on what your system is and what you're trying to achieve. The other thing that this is going to do, beyond just sort of making it look like a fun place, is it's going to provide examples of what good content is. And this is really important. So going back to your daily life, think about your canteen at work. If you walk in there every day and every day there's a mess of dishes left around, are you going to clean up after yourself, or are you just going to leave the mess of dishes, your dish is just going to be one more in the pile? Conversely, if you walk in and every day there's a sign reminding you, hey, please wash your own dishes, and every day everyone does wash their own dishes, are you really going to be like the one person who leaves your thing in the sink for someone else to clean up? No. Because we innately want to perform to the expectations that are set for us. And the same is true online. This is the reason why Stack Overflow has very strict rules about what's on topic and off topic. This is the reason why you take a small group of people and seed initially. Because people, when they come in and see that, they'll innately just start doing what they already see there. So once you've gotten all of this kind of core content in, it's time to start promoting and growing your actual whole base, right? So first thing to do is just invite everyone in. Boom, pull them all. You've got the initial base of content, you've got the initial base of users, just get everyone else in right away. Communicate who this is for, how to join, and of course, most importantly, what you want them to be doing, right? You got to tell people, why do we even put this up, right? What should you be doing as part of this? And the last thing that you need to do as kind of the community manager, the community admin, is what's almost a little bit of astroturfing or grassroots stuff. Do whatever you need to create emotional attachments through positive early experiences. So go back to the products and think about the products that you really love, right? The things that you recommend to everyone you talk to. For me, Zapier. I love this product. Why do you love those products so much? Well, one, it's probably because it enabled you to do something that you didn't realize you were going to be able to do. And it probably did that the first time you touched it, right? There was just a magical thing that happened the first time you went in there. Participation in any community is the exact same. So with Stack Overflow, one of the things we encourage people is make sure those first early questions on the site get answered quick. Because the more you have those early adopters, they will become evangelists, and they will ensure that on an ongoing basis, you keep having those same magical experiences for everyone new who joins. And that's it. That's all you have to do, right? Totally simple. So what's this look like when it actually works? Well, I'm going to walk you through a quick case we had with an actual client of ours. So a large 2,000 person tech team building a highly technical product that was basically a platform for all of their other developers to build on top of, right? Which meant that they have an internal product team that has to spend half their time supporting all of their other developers. So not super efficient because they're spending all their time on support. But they had one other big problem as part of it too, which is that because they were spending so much time on support, and it was all one-to-one support kind of, the only things that were really getting fixed were whatever the squeakiest wheels were, right? Who was complaining the most? Who was leveraging their internal connections in order to get their things prioritized? Because they had no other way to handle the prioritization. So we went in and we helped them set up a Stack Overflow community. We walked them through all of the same stuff I just walked you through as part of our community development process. And immediately, within, 12 weeks, their product team had 20% of their time back, right? Because they have this community now where people are helping each other instead of relying entirely on the product team to solve all of their problems for them. They were getting their new problems solved much faster, in about an hour. But most importantly, for anyone who loves being a data-driven developer or data-driven business person, they had a new data-driven pipeline that they could go back to, right? Because if you have a community of people who are all doing something, you can look at that underlying data layer and say, hey, this is where people are actually going and spending their time, right? It's a quantitative assessment instead of a qualitative one. So you're able to take this and actually feed this back into your product development pipeline to better prioritize your features and, to going back to the original idea, outsource your innovation. So that's how you build an internal community. I've got a few minutes left to take any questions. And of course, if you're interested in talking more, building communities is what we at Stack Overflow love to do. So you're always free to email me. I'm just alex@stackoverflow.com. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes. Specifically internally or in general? So the question was, how do you deal with bad behavior in posts? Delete it as quickly as possible. Again, it's one of those things is it goes back to setting the examples for people. If people go to a place and they see there's not a lot of bad posts, they're going to be much less likely to put those posts up in the first place. So definitely bad behavior begets more bad behavior. I mean, this is how trolls feed off each other, right? So basically just trying to wipe it away as quickly as possible is the way to do it. I think the other thing to do is assume best intentions. So, the first time, like maybe you send a ping or you add a comment to it saying like, hey, we had to remove your post because it wasn't on topic for this. If the person keeps doing that, then you suspend them. If the person keeps doing it after they come back, you kick them out of the community. Any other ones? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Hope you enjoyed.